public arena want to chat with us about any issue? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent. I'll entertain a motion. That's going to have to be you.
That would be, I would move that we,
Okay, and I'll second. Any questions, comments? Seeing none. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Director Orzali
aye.
and Director Gould.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We'll move on to presentation items. And the first one will be, I believe we've changed from DC Holbrook to Melissa Maddock. And we'll talk about the protected sick leave policy recommendation. Wow.
Okay. Good evening, directors. I'm Melissa Maddox, the HR manager here at Metro Fire. Tonight, I bring you the protected sick leave policy, 02.011.01. The purpose of this policy is to comply with the California Labor Code Sections 233 and Senate Bill 579. This protected sick leave is a right granted to eligible employees under the California law. Employees don't receive additional sick leave under this policy. However, it authorizes employees to use up to half of their.
Sorry. Wait for him to answer his phone. Hello? Okay, keep going.
Okay, it authorizes employees to use up to half of their sick leave accruals that they earn in a year to take time off to care for a sick family member or to care for themselves. The use of the sick leave is protected, so it can't count against an employee or be used as a basis for any kind of discipline. This policy replaces the district's KinCare policy. The KinCare policy only applied to sick leave use for family members. However, the new law has revised that and says now that the protected sick leave applies to family members and yourself. And there's some other changes to that. So the sick leave now applies to yourself and your family members. It expands the definition of what a qualified family member is to include grandparents, grandchildren, and siblings. It also expanded sick leave usage to include employees who may be a victim of a violent crime, domestic violence, or sexual assault. This policy also differs a little bit from the FMLA policy in that this sick leave policy is intended for minor sicknesses, such as the cold or the flu, and it includes preventative care. Versus FMLA is for your more serious health conditions where you're going to be out for an extended period of time. As directed by the policy committee, this policy is for review and informational purposes only, but if you have any questions, feel free.
Director, questions?
Only one. As I understand it, this represents a maximum of 160 hours?
It's half of what you would accrue within the year. So from January to December, if you accrue 160 hours, just as a regular number, you could use 80 of that towards this protected sick leave.
I see. Okay. And if someone has much more than that, is it still a maximum of 80 hours that they can allocate in a year?
They would still be able to use their sick leave. It's just this part of it is protected, and there may be other, if they're going to use an extended amount of time, it may fall under other protected laws like FMLA.
I see.
Where they'd be
Okay.
covered. So you can still use it, it just, that first half is completely protected. You can't be disciplined per the sick leave policy.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
My turn.
Okay,
Ready?
yes.
Okay. It seems that there's a little bit of contradiction in this document, and it may just be something that you can explain to me. So let's look at the disciplinary action component. The district will not deny an employee the right to use half protected sick leave to care for a covered family member themselves. And then it gets kind of weird because of themselves. And then the next page, it says terminate, threaten. What happened to what happened on page 7? and then page 8, the sentence seems wonky. See where it says protected sick leave to care for their covered family member or themselves. Terminate, threaten to terminate, demote, it's, What happened?
That part of it is just, is referring to fraudulent abuse
okay, but
of
you,
sick leave.
if the, so the disciplinary action comments say, the district will not deny an employee the right to use half, blah, 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 qualifying reasons under the protected sick leave to care for their covered family member or themselves. Terminate, threaten to terminate, demote, suspend, or any, it makes no sense to me. That whole sentence makes no sense to me. Protected sick leave to care, so what exactly is that sentence saying? One, it's incredibly long, and two, it seems like it's two different thoughts completely. So I'm not sure what that whole thing says. I think there's a line or two missing. If you're to look at the original document, you may have a section, a couple of lines that are missing because it shifts from the district will not deny to use it for yourself and that's all, and then all of a sudden it says the word terminate, and it's completely out of context. It makes no sense to me.
I can revise it. It's just intended to say that we will not discipline you, we will not terminate you for the use of that, half of that sick leave. So I'll
Okay.
go back and,
So, yeah, and so I
Revise that
think
so it's clear.
it's just, there's something missing clearly.
okay,
The next thing is, so we say that we're not gonna terminate you, we're not gonna threaten to terminate you, or any of that kind of stuff, right? Or demote or suspend in any manner discriminating them for using their protected leave. And then it turns right around and there's a fraudulent abuse clause, which clearly says we will do the things we've just said we won't do, unless it's fraudulent. So I think in the first paragraph that we talked about, there has to be some sentence that says, this all applies. If you use it, we're not gonna threaten to terminate you if you wanna use it, unless there's fraud. And then you can come back to the paragraph that talks about what we will do in the case of fraud. And so I think we're saying we won't do anything to you if you wanna use your sick leave, that's good,
right.
unless it's fraud. And then this next paragraph under the fraud makes sense to me. But at first we say, we're not gonna do anything to you if you use it. And then we have this thing that says, oh yeah, we will, if we consider it. And this is where I think we've got some other issues. Who makes the determination if something's, so when I wanna use my protected sick leave, do I have to notify somebody?
You would, and right now, we would not require a doctor's note or
No,
anything
right,
like
but
that under the law.
I'm gonna not show up to work, so I have to let somebody know.
You let your supervisor know
Okay, so I
I'm
let my
sick.
supervisor know, and the supervisor says, yeah, good, you're good.
Mm-hmm.
I go on my way. Later on, somebody makes a determination that it's inappropriate.
I think that would revolve around maybe some sort of investigation. If, say, you're sick, you're out sick for 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and then somebody sees you skiing on Lake Tahoe,
Sure.
then
Well,
there
wouldn't
would
that be fraud?
That would be fraud, yes.
And that's, to me, very clear. You're
Yeah.
fraudulently using it, boom, we're done. The inappropriate piece, to me, gets really muddy.
That's
Who makes
the-
that determination?
That's the thing with the law. The law is very, very vague when it comes to that. So you pretty much, as the employer, have to take their word for it. You cannot require a doctor's note.
Yeah, so I guess my concern is that I use it, my supervisor says go. Later on, somebody makes a determination it was inappropriate. Well, my supervisor said I could go, so that's useless, because my supervisor said I could go. I explained what I was doing. If I lied, that's fraud to me. So I think the inappropriate piece is, that's really up to a whole bunch and really messy for us versus just saying, if you use this fraudulently, we're gonna basically do what we've said we're gonna do. But the inappropriate language, unless that's in code, I would say we're adding something to that language that makes it very squishy to me and not enforceable. Because again, if my supervisor, I tell him something and then somebody later on says, well, he shouldn't have said that. Well, you can't do anything to me because it was, at the time I was okay to do it and I went on my way. If you didn't like it, that's one thing. Now, if I said I was gonna do one thing and I clearly was doing something else, I was in Hawaii. To me, that's pretty clear evidence of fraud. So I guess I'm concerned about the wishy-washy nature of, we're not gonna do anything to you unless it's fraud. And we just leave it at that. And then we have a policy that says, and if we determine it's fraud through an investigation, now we've applied the fraud component and that's it. But the inappropriate thing, I just think that opens us up to all sorts of problems down the road. Fraud is fraud is fraud, and I don't think we have to add the word inappropriate unless it's in code. Can you tell me if it's in code?
It refers to inappropriate I think in the fraud arena, if that makes
Okay,
sense.
so I would just say
they're
fraud.
kinda- Yeah, that's what I mean. We
Right,
could
I
take
would
that
just
word
leave
out.
the word fraud there, and I think we're gonna have a lot easier time during an investigation to just say, we've decided it's fraud, and a story. But I'm looking at inappropriate, I've dealt with people that their inappropriate and my inappropriate are like light years away.
Yeah.
And how do I argue with somebody who just goes, well, it's fine that you think it's inappropriate, I certainly don't. So there we are stuck, and we got nothing, versus, yeah, this is clearly fraud, and I think there's some good cases that can tell us what the definition of fraud is, and then we just let it go at that.
Right.
So,
I might just add though, just real quick, because in looking at it though, I think fraud is a definition that is a legal term for illegal behavior, whereas inappropriate behavior might not be, you might not have broke or guilty of a crime, which would, fraud to me is criminal versus inappropriate conduct that might violate policy or intent of policy. I think the issue in here is, and we'd have to definitely look at it from a standpoint of, because this language comes out of code somewhere though, as it relates to those two things. I think in my mind, they are separate and distinctively different.
okay, so,
Fraud, I will find out about after a formal investigation and somebody is found guilty of fraud in a criminal arena.
so then are we gonna, Chief, I hear what you're saying, but then are we gonna list out the things that we decide are inappropriate? Because how do you get into an argument with somebody about what's appropriate, inappropriate, unless it's listed out? Particularly in the case where a supervisor says, okay, go. And then later on, you think it was inappropriate.
Yeah, but, and I actually really do agree with you in terms of we need to quantify it a little tighter. But I would say that inappropriate in a term of, like in practical application, we have an electronic database that people use for time and attendance.
Right.
And so there is no overt, my name's John and I'm going to call my captain who's not at work yet either because I'm calling in at 4 a.m. and he doesn't
Right.
come on until tomorrow. So there's not a one-to-one correlation to an approval body on that in a real time.
Okay.
So there is no overt qualification of approval from a supervisor, in my
Okay.
opinion, that approves sick leave on the fly basis.
Okay.
So inappropriate will be, I called in sick, and I've done this a whole bunch of different times, and it was in a protected leave, and it was 132 hours in a calendar year, but it turns out I got caught skiing at Vail, Colorado during that time that I was actually on sick leave. So it's a protected leave, and you can't ask them at the time that they took it. But if you come and circumstances would find it afterwards that you were using it inappropriately, maybe not illegally, maybe not in a fraud. I would call that fraud, but that's probably technically not fraud. That would be the time that we would go after somebody and discipline them for inappropriate use of sick leave, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was sick the day before I was at Vail.
I know. And trust me, people can be on vacation and they get sick and then they can petition to not use
I think you and I are
vacation
on the
leave.
same mindset,
yeah.
but I would just think we need to clarify that piece to get rid of the loopholes that could be used. I mean, so anyway,
Just to support, in the fraud section, I think we have a really good clarification about what constitutes fraud. And so that needs to be maintained and the language needs to be tightened up. But do we have any history of pursuing, quote, inappropriate use of sick leave?
Yes.
We do. And we have a sick leave policy right now that we've been using, but we are planning on meeting and conferring with the union to revise that policy, and that policy would apply to the hours that are after the protected hours.
Yeah.
And could that inappropriate use lead to dismissal?
Good,
Theoretically, yes.
Okay. All right.
depending on the level, you know.
Well, the level and also the egregiousness of the, and repetitive nature of it. You know, if you did it a year ago and you did it again within the confines of whatever discipline you had last time, and it would, compound on itself, and/or being a aggravating or mitigating factor towards another behavior during the same time period that might not have been the same behavior, but a similar behavior. So yes, it could lead to discipline.
So what you just said, Chief, causes me to wonder, do we need to further codify what inappropriate means? Or provide an example of it? I don't know the answer to this. I'm just asking.
I don't know how we would come up with a list of
Well,
every possibility.
It
I
actually
think it-
does. If you look at what you've written, it actually says, including but not limited to. So it does actually give you examples of how this would be applied.
Right,
Yeah.
and inappropriate, I think inappropriate would be only determined after there was an investigation done, not just a supervisor saying, I don't agree with what you used your sick leave for. It wouldn't go that way. It would be a formal investigation.
So then, would it be of any benefit to include a phrase inappropriate based upon administrative review or?
Yeah, you know what, I think though that, and clearly Melissa's running her shop over there, I'm not, but my opinion on this, it would be that I don't think the policy will ever be able to get that specific. I think the policy will always lead to some sense of interpretation, and these are put together in a joint, and I would also just reconfirm that labor's signed off on this as well as part of a working condition. So even the pretext of this particular policy has been negotiated to a certain degree with labor. I don't think they're gonna wanna have, and I'm speaking for them, but I probably shouldn't, but too many contexts of, it's tight examples in here. They like to leave it, and I think we have some advantage of leaving it a little bit open for interpretation as well, so that we would have some more latitude. Because I wouldn't want to have 15 different things, and that's the only thing that I could go based on inappropriateness. Because it would be a 16th or 17th one that I hadn't considered.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, good.
Any other
That,
questions?
no, I said my
Good
piece.
dialogue, though.
Okay.
This is, we're just
Yeah.
going through this process, and then it'll be, you're looking for action tonight to then take it to the full board, is that what I'm?
This is administrative policy, so it will not go to full board.
All right, so it's been negotiated with our local, and everybody's okay with this language, and we're moving forward.
Well, yes, but I would say that it comes to this board but I think that the intent of the board is not to check a box. It is definitely for this dialogue that just occurred.
Okay.
I think there's some provisions in here that I think that need to be added, and I think Melissa would agree with that as well. And then before we finalize it, we'd ping it back off of labor to make sure, because I think it only makes sense for everybody. Those changes or proposed changes and the cleanup on that one section, it'll make it a better policy.
Yeah.
And that's what I think we bring it to this body for. So, and I appreciate the input.
That was my hope.
Okay. Thank
I
you.
think we're, what, do you not get to come back for the next one?
No.
Oh, okay.
Holbrook.
PC Holbrook. Thank you very much. All right, so that one was easy enough.
Could we
Let's go after
request-
this. Yeah?
Could we request that she handle the next one and get rid of BC Holbrook?
Yes, you could.
Oh, I'm sorry, didn't know the mic was on.
All right, Chief, go ahead. Catastrophic leave bank policy.
So tonight before you for your review and consideration, we have a new policy for the district. It's a catastrophic leave bank policy. You will notice that this is only for unrepresented employees. We also drew up a parallel policy for represented employees. Local 522 was unable to come to terms with that particular policy, so we'll continue to meet and confer with them and bring that at a later date. A little bit of history just for context, and by that I mean a very little. The district, in my entire career, the district has always utilized a as-needed, we'll call and get some volunteer hours. Some folks would throw some hours into a pot when an individual ran into a scenario that they were out of any paid leave.
Okay.
The IRS has actually come down and determined that the donation of hours in that kind of informal plan is actually a taxable event. And so what we're trying to do is rectify two wrongs. One, we don't want a taxable event. And two, the unrepresented employees in this district have never had any type of plan to protect them, whereas represented employees enjoy a long-term disability, that type of leave. Unrep don't have any of that. Okay. So this is hopefully killing two birds with one stone. One of the biggest milestones for the IRS is that this has to be a district administered plan. So what we've done is met all of the IRS considerations relative to the plan, that it's district administered, that you have to donate the leave, but the leave cannot be identified for any individual. That you specify how much leave can be donated, and the fact that once you donate the leave, you have no rights to it whatsoever. So we built a plan, and actually Director Rizali may recognize some of this, largely out of existing catastrophic leave plans that came out of the education field. And so found the best of those things and then tailored it to fit us. So basically what, without reading the plan to you, I'm not gonna go over the big pieces of it, but the administration will be handled by 3 individuals. That is the human resource manager, the chief financial officer, and the deputy chief of administration. The idea was that you get a cross group, some of those that are non-sworn and some that are sworn, so that when we get the represented plan in here as well, there's a sworn individual who sits on that committee as well, so that 522 feels a little more secure. Frankly, they weren't quite even happy with that, so they're gonna try to add members to that particular board.
Pete, can we stop right there?
Yep.
Unrepresented employees, I see 3 people sitting in front of me at the most senior levels of our administration. Do you have anyone in that administrative role of this bank that's not at that level?
For the unrepresented, we
Well,
will.
my thought is, okay, you're getting a perspective at the 36,000 foot level with our most senior staff. That's great, no issues. But what about that unrepresented soul that may have a completely different perspective and yet not have a seat at the table? And so I appreciate the administration being all top-level senior folks, but when you're talking about a bank and its use and perspectives, can't we reach down into maybe a different rank or two, if there is such a thing in the unrepresented group, and say, hey, why don't we get somebody that doesn't have a brass badge, or isn't a CFO, or isn't the H, so that they too, who are those additional individuals besides some of the folks sitting here?
Totally fair question. Unrepresented, however, only brings in 2 groups. The senior management, which would be, Amanda, myself, and then the management group, which would bring in Melissa Maddox.
Right.
And so beyond that, once you get down to a specialist level, you could have technically a specialist in here.
Right.
But after that, it's all, everybody's represented. And so we're only missing one particular rank.
Yeah, and why not? I guess this isn't I mean, to me, it's like, why not have that additional perspective, which may be different? Because I looked at this and went, okay, great, it's all the top senior staff. But the people that it applies to aren't all top-level staff. Why not just add one more voice to have one more perspective in the organization? That way, everyone that's impacted by this policy has a representative at the table.
I will bring that change back when we bring it to the full board.
I mean, am I
providing it
just
moving
being
forward.
craziness? But I thought, we're trying to be transparent, and we're trying to be inclusive, and we're trying all these big things, and I saw this and thought, if it's just one more individual, what's gonna be the downside to that?
No, we can definitely make that change.
Okay?
So basically, as an individual, the individuals in the plan are going to have to donate 1 month worth of accrual of sick leave per year. And so in January, we'll open that up for somebody who comes in the middle of the year. They'll have their opportunity in their first month to donate 1 month worth of accrual. At that time, they are vested in the plan for that particular year, and each year thereafter, they will be able to donate 1 month of accrual time to maintain their membership in the plan. Now remember, under IRS tax code, there is no ownership, so once it's in, and if you decide not to donate again, you do not get the time back. It has to stay that way so that it's kind of isolated, if you will.
Basically, it's your insurance policy, should you ever have to tap into catastrophic leave, your buy-in is a month each year of
Correct.
sick leave.
Correct. It's
common.
completely fair and reasonable.
Yeah.
I do want to highlight a couple of things, and these are extremely important. They are also, from a board perspective, the days granted from the bank are non-transferable. They are not to be sold during a buyback or a buyout. They are not eligible for retirement service credit. So if I, as a recipient of those hours, end up not coming back to work and retiring, those hours have to be given back before I retire. The idea is that, and this is a PERS regulation, I cannot be enriched through the utilization, enriched with greater sick leave when I retire through the utilization of somebody else's hours. PERS, we did a preemptive strike, already had this policy reviewed by PERS. They gave it a thumbs up based upon the fact that that information was in there, that particular government code was in there.
Yeah.
So, and then the only other piece that I want to bring out to you tonight is the fiscal impact, and it wouldn't be prudent to not know. If I donate to the bank as an individual who is going to retire soon and I retire, my hours stay in that bank. So technically, I have extended the life of an unfunded liability in the form of those hours. I don't own those hours, but had I just retired and not donated them, then they would have never been there and you wouldn't extend the life. The reality is that occurs today already. It just occurs in a fashion that is taxable under the IRS. So we're just trying to clean it up so that it's non-taxable, but it wouldn't be prudent if I didn't at least inform you of that fact. So with that,
Wouldn't be prudent.
I will answer any other questions.
Director Marzali?
Only this, Chris, this is a very normal kind of practice in education. Somebody just makes a great deal of sense, and I have seen it work to great benefit to individuals. I absolutely support this.
I do too, working a few years in academe.
Just a few.
This is really, really a good thing, and obviously is utilized in some of the most extreme instances that we see. So we've dealt with the management piece. Can I just delve in a little bit more to kind of see how this practically plays out?
Absolutely.
So you've got potentially 4 members sitting on this committee that oversees the bank utilization, correct? Mm-hmm. An employee makes a request of the bank to utilize hours. You have a 4-person committee to make a decision. What happens when there's a 2-2 split?
There was a reason there was an odd number in the
Is
policy.
it and I'm trying to think because these things have happened in a place that I frequent. What do you do in a case where there's a 2-2 split? Where are you going?
So the policy was written with 3 for that very reason. However, I will increase it probably not to 4, but in fact to 5.
Because there has to be that, okay, what do we do here in those kinds of cases? And
What I
so-
don't want, and again, the part of this is, and we'll see this again when we bring forward the represented policy. I don't want a committee of folks that I can't get a hold of.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want a committee that, that's so large that it becomes unwieldy to make that decision. There are very specific things that employee, per the policy, has to turn in with that request.
Absolutely.
And so the interpretation of that needs to be fair, objective, but pretty high level kind of thinking. I don't mean high level in rank. I mean
I get it.
a level of thinking that is not going to try to outguess somebody.
Might we consider, and as I thought about this the other night, might you consider, now that you've agreed that you'll have a representative from each of the bodies that is impacted by the policy, in the cases of a 2-2 split, the fire chief makes the deciding vote?
Sure.
Impartial, well, he would be unprotected, so you're part of the team that can take it.
Correct. I think, though, that that's a reasonable alternative
Right.
there.
Sure.
Is a 2-2 split, then the tie vote goes to the chief, who's part of that process as well. What do you think?
I like it.
Because I'm not seeing 5 being, 5 members, then it's like herding cats when you want to get together. But if you did a 4 and every group basically had a representative,
Yeah.
and then the chief made the deciding vote, you wouldn't have to go 5. In those rare, I can't imagine there's going to be many cases where there's not going to be almost consensus, unanimous voting, simply because of the nature of when these things are used.
That's correct.
Okay, I mean, those are
Yeah,
some of the notes that I
think that's
took.
a great revision there.
Absolutely.
Besides that, I think I agree with my colleague. I think this is something that is absolutely fundamental to all employees, to have their colleagues be able to do these kind of things for them. And it is just incredible when it's done. It's pretty fabulous stuff for a family. So I'm fully supportive of it with those changes.
I will
Again,
make
no
those-
action, just brought before us after you've been, now this one, obviously,
This one we
is
are gonna-
within house, you didn't have to have it negotiated with your local.
This particular one,
Yeah.
but we will bring this back before the full board
Okay.
with your
All
recommendation.
right, very good, okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, sounds like we had some good work there. Agenda items for next meeting, those are always driven by the body here in Taj Mahal, so we won't worry about that until you tell us that we have to have a next meeting. If there are things coming up, it looks like, Chief Holbrook, you have some items that are in the queue.
We have a bunch in meet and confer, and that's our problem is.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll get those through the gauntlet as well, so it looks like we may be seeing something. Is it reasonable to think we'll see something June, or are we looking at July?
June 20, close. I don't know that far ahead.
It's the
yet.
first
Go to
meeting.
July probably is when we're gonna be meeting again, potentially? All right, so just for your information, we might have a policy meeting in July.
And Director Gold, can I interrupt for just a moment?
Please.
This catastrophic leave policy did require action if you wanted to take it to the full board with the suggested changes, or would you prefer it come back to policy committee before that happens? Either way.
Yeah, you know, this needs to get going and the bank needs to be developed. I think if we can tweak the words so that we show the representation of conversations today, present it in 2 weeks to the full board, that, I would like to get this approved by the full board and moved on. So we'll take action tonight with the changes discussed so that it can move to the agenda items for 2 weeks from now, because we really need to get the bank open for business so that should we have an employee need it, there's something there. I really think this is an important thing. You never know, you just never do. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve as amended.
I move that we approve this as amended.
I second the motion.
Director Orzali
Aye.
and Gould.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, guys. That was fun. They're like, that guy's got to shut up.